Winter stretches long through February and into the first weeks of March. In this time of bitter cold, the Mabee Farm sits quiet. Historically, these late winter days would be lean times. The growing season would still be many months away, and wild game would be hard to come by. But even in the dark depths of the season, a clever farming family can still find some sweet sustenance in the trees around them. Indeed, the very first harvest of the year would be maple sap, which could be turned into scrumptious syrup. In this video, we'll teach you a little about the history of maple syrup and a lot about the process. If you pay close attention, you should be able to do this yourself, provided you have access to the right trees. The tradition of syrup making stretches far back to the historical memory of the Mohawk Valley. It's a practice we can trace to the native peoples of the northeastern United States, who discovered long ago that they could extract sweet sap from maple trees. Boiling this sap would first produce a dark, sweet, viscous liquid. Further boiling would produce crystalline sugar that provided an excellent source of energy. Local Algonquin and Haudenosaunee peoples all use syrup and maple sugar as a vital ingredient in their cuisine. As Europeans arrived in North America in the 17th century, they learned of the unique properties of the maple and began to produce their own maple sugar. Throughout the colonial period, sugarcane was grown on large plantations in the Caribbean and Brazil. There, cane sugar was produced by slave labor under incredibly harsh conditions. In addition to a staggering human cost, the sugar product of these plantations carried a high financial cost, and only the wealthiest families in Europe or the European colonies could afford to import it. For average families in the northern English colonies in Canada, maple sugar was a much more accessible option. As importing cane sugar became cheaper in the middle of the 19th century, maple farmers increasingly shifted their production away from crystallized sugar towards liquid syrup. Today, syrup is a ubiquitous part of American cuisine, especially at breakfast. Who doesn't love a short stack of pancakes drizzled with golden brown syrup? However, as Americans have become increasingly oblivious to where their food comes from, large retailers have sought cheaper alternatives to maple syrup. High fructose corn syrup can be found in just about anything modern Americans eat, and breakfast syrup is no exception. In fact, most store-bought syrups today are derived not from the maple tree, but from corn. But with good taste in mind, we here at the Mabee Farm think there's no true substitute for fresh, local maple syrup. The process of making maple syrup has remained unchanged for centuries. Of course, you need to start with the right type of tree. Many trees like the birch and walnut produce sap that's edible, but not necessarily tasty. The maple tree is by far the most popular tree to tap. In particular, the sugar maple, black maple, and red maple are best. But what makes these trees so good? Well, let's learn a little science, shall we? In the autumn months, maple trees stop growing and begin to store energy in the form of starch for the winter. Temperatures and weather vary slightly from year to year, but typically maple production happens in the last weeks of February and the first weeks of March. You'll know the time is right when temperatures rise above freezing during the day and drop below freezing at night. The perfect range is between 20 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. This cycle of freezing and thawing creates pressure changes within the tree that can cause the sap to flow. Crucially, between 40 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit, enzymes within the maple tree turn the stored starches into simple sugars, which get carried by the flowing sap. Those sugars are what gives syrup its taste. A simple tap can be used to siphon off some of this sap for collection. As you can see, we've crafted our taps out of a sumac tree, but steel or plastic ones are more common today. Tapping a tree should not harm it as long as you follow some guidelines. A tree must be at least 10 inches in diameter before it can support one tap. Trees with a diameter between 20 and 25 inches can support 2 taps. A tree larger than 25 inches can support 3 taps, but that's the maximum. Modern sugar farms produce so much syrup that collecting from buckets requires far too much labor and time. Instead, they use tube and vacuum systems, some stretching miles long, to deliver the sap directly to their sugar house. If you taste the sap, fresh out of the tree, you'll notice only a hint of sweetness. Even though maple sap has a higher sugar content than any other kind of sap, it's still only about 2% by volume. To turn the raw sap into proper syrup, we simply need to boil away the excess water until the concentration is closer to 65%. While this step is simple enough, it's very time-consuming. Typically, to produce just 1 gallon of syrup, you'll need to boil 40 gallons of sap. Here, we've used an evaporator pan with a shallow depth and large surface area for the sake of efficiency. But any stove-worthy container would work too. A thermometer should be used to monitor the temperature. When the temperature reaches 219 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 7 degrees above the boiling point of water, you should have maple syrup. If you like, you can continue to boil until crystallized sugar appears. Because of the immense amount of water vapor released, this process can be damaging to an interior living space. Traditionally, sugar farms built special outbuildings known as sugar shacks for this purpose. For our demonstration, we decided to just do our boiling outside. With just a little bit of patience, you'll have a sweet treat to enjoy. Still, we think you'll find you enjoy the process almost as much as you enjoy the product. This is a great family activity where everyone can play a part. Every year we have a Maple Day at the Mabee Farm where guests can learn firsthand how it's done. Maybe you're an aspiring sugar maker, or maybe you're more inclined to purchase your syrup from a local sugar house. But whoever you are, it's important to know where your food comes from and how it's made. And you should always keep in mind that there's a whole lot of history behind every bite you take.